Top 1. The golden elixir of onion peels. Here is a question worth asking before another onion skin gets dropped into the trash. Which part of the onion holds more potassium? The white bulb that goes into the soup, or the dry, papery brown skin that gets peeled off and thrown away? The answer surprises most people. It is the skin. Those outer layers, the ones considered garbage for as long as kitchens have existed, carry one of the most concentrated doses of potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron found anywhere in the produce aisle. They also carry a compound called quercetin, the same compound that makes red wine, apples, and blueberries good for the human heart. Inside a plant, quercetin does similar protective work. It shields leaves from harsh summer sun. It slows the spread of fungal infection. It steadies the plant's internal chemistry when a heat wave or a cold snap rolls through. Now here is where the story gets interesting, because this is the moment most gardeners make the wrong turn. They hear about onion peels and they imagine digging the skins straight into the soil, expecting them to decompose and feed the roots. That method works, but it takes weeks. The nutrients stay locked inside the dry fibers while the plant above continues to wilt. By the time the skins break down, the plant is already gone. The real trick is water, and it comes down to something most people learn in grade school and forget by adulthood. Water pulls things out of plant tissue. The same way a tea bag releases color and flavor into a hot cup, an onion skin releases its minerals into a jar of water. The process takes 24 to 48 hours at room temperature. A handful of dry skins, a quart jar, cool water from the tap. That is the entire setup. Within a day, the water darkens into the color of weak tea. By the second day, it is the shade of deep amber. That color is not a coincidence. It is potassium, magnesium, calcium, and the quercetin compounds leaving the plant tissue and dissolving into the liquid. Once those minerals are in the water, they are already in a form the plant can absorb through its roots immediately. No composting, no waiting, no breaking down. Poured at the base of a yellowing tomato plant or around a pepper that has stopped setting fruit, this amber liquid begins to work within days. The stems thicken. New leaves come in a deeper green. Flower production picks up within a week. And here is a detail most gardening books leave out. The plant's own immune system starts fighting harder. Plants have a form of immunity, and quercetin helps switch it on. Stem rot slows. Seedling wilt fades. The plants that would have been pulled out by the weekend are, instead, still standing at the end of the season. Here is the part nobody on television ever says out loud. No fertilizer company in North America can build a business around onion peel tea. There is no way to package it, no patent to file, no premium shelf space to sell. That is the real reason this method disappeared from mainstream gardening advice over the last 70 years. Not because the blue crystals in plastic bags work better, but because the crystals can be printed with a logo and sold for $9 a box. Onion peel tea feeds the plant directly, but the next ingredient does not feed the plant at all. It feeds something far more important: the billions of invisible workers living in the top inch of every garden bed. And that changes everything about how plants grow. Top 2, the ancient secret of fermented rice water. What if the cloudy water poured down the drain every evening, the water left over from rinsing a pot of uncooked rice, turns out to be one of the most powerful soil treatments ever studied under a microscope? It sounds like an exaggeration. It is not. Washed rice water carries starches, B vitamins, and small amounts of iron and zinc. Fresh from the pot, it is already mildly useful to the garden. But the real transformation begins a few days later, after the water has been left at room temperature in a covered jar. The liquid takes on a faintly sour smell, like the first hint of sourdough starter. Most people would pour it out at that stage. Doing so would be throwing away the most valuable part. That sour smell is the signature of a microbial bloom. Lactic acid bacteria and wild yeast have moved in and taken over the liquid. And this is where the research of a Japanese agricultural scientist named Dr. Teruo Higa becomes important. In the 1980s, Dr. Higa, a professor at the University of the Ryukyus, introduced the concept of effective microorganisms, often shortened to EM. His work showed that certain beneficial microbes, when added to depleted soil, could bring it back to life in a matter of weeks. EM formulas are now used on farms in more than 150 countries, and the microbes at the heart of those formulas are the same ones that appear naturally in fermented rice water, for free, with no shipping cost. Here is what actually happens underground when this liquid is applied to a garden bed. The bacteria and yeast in the water meet the microbes already living around the plant roots. The starches and sugars in the rice water act as a feast. The soil microbiome wakes up, multiplies, and gets to work. Within a single week, the population of beneficial microbes around a treated plant can triple. 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, after this kind of treatment, can hold more than 1 billion living organisms, more than the population of North America, packed into a volume smaller than a coffee bean. And this is the moment where the whole idea clicks for most gardeners who try it. The rice water does not feed the plant. It builds the plant's support system. It is the difference between handing someone a single meal and handing them a working kitchen. Food runs out. A kitchen keeps producing. Now, the common mistake. Nearly every first-time user of rice water pours it on fresh, straight from rinsing the rice. Fresh rice water is mild. It does something, but very little. Fermented rice water, 3 to 5 days old, is an entirely different tool. The smell is the signal. If the liquid does not carry that faint sour tang, it is not ready yet. Skipping the fermentation step is the single biggest reason people try this method once, see no dramatic result, and never try it again. There is also a dilution rule that matters. Fermented rice water should be mixed with plain water at about 1 part rice water to 10 parts water before it touches the soil. Undiluted, the acidity is strong enough to irritate tender roots, especially in seedlings. Diluted correctly, it is gentle enough to apply every week through the growing season. Rice water wakes up the life of the soil, but a plant already collapsing today does not have time to wait for the soil to rebuild itself. That plant needs food it can drink before the sun sets, which is why the next method exists. Top 3, the rebirth from the fallen vegetable scrap. Digestate, every refrigerator in America has one. The forgotten tomato at the bottom of the crisper drawer. The head of lettuce that wilted before anyone got around to using it. The bruised cucumber pushed to the back of the shelf. For most households, these scraps end up in the trash, or at best in a compost bin that will not produce usable material for another 6 months. For a gardener who knows the method, those same scraps are the fastest acting nitrogen source that can be made at home. The science behind this dates back to the 1840s and to a German chemist named Justus von Liebig, one of the founding fathers of modern agriculture. Liebig proved something that changed the way farmers thought about soil. Plant growth, he showed, is not determined by the nutrients a plant has plenty of. It is determined by the one nutrient the plant has the least of. This became known as the law of the minimum. Picture a wooden barrel with staves of different heights. The water inside only rises as high as the shortest stave. It does not matter how tall the rest of the staves are. One short stave caps the whole barrel. Plants work the same way. If a tomato has generous potassium and plenty of phosphorus, but not quite enough nitrogen, its growth stops at the nitrogen line, no matter how rich the rest of the soil may be. And nitrogen, in nearly every American backyard garden, is the single most common missing stave. Green kitchen scraps carry what soil scientists call a low carbon to nitrogen ratio. In plain language, they are packed with nitrogen compared to their fiber content. Overripe tomatoes, soft peppers, wilted spinach, bruised kale, old cucumbers, all of them are nitrogen in disguise. When those scraps are crushed into a 5-gallon bucket, covered with water, weighted down with a plate to keep them submerged, and left to ferment for about 2 weeks, something remarkable happens. Bacteria in the water break the plant cells apart. The nitrogen locked inside the tissue gets released and pulled into the liquid. The process has a name, nitrogen mineralization. And in water, it happens far faster than it would in a compost pile. The finished liquid is not pretty. It is dark, cloudy, and strong-smelling. The smell is the proof it is ready. Any gardener who has walked past a working compost tea barrel in late summer knows the scent, earthy, pungent, unmistakable. Diluted at about 1 part scrap liquid to 30 parts fresh water, this digestate goes straight onto the soil at the base of the plant. Within 4 to 6 days, the change is visible. Pale, tired leaves deepen 2 full shades of green. New shoots push out from the leaf axils where none were forming before. Stems thicken near the base. A plant that looked finished on Monday is setting new flowers by Saturday. Now the common mistake, because this one burns more gardens every summer than any other. Many gardeners, excited by the results, apply the liquid directly onto the leaves as a foliar spray or pour it on undiluted. Both are a disaster. The liquid is strong enough to scorch leaves on contact, and undiluted, it can burn root hairs beyond recovery. This method works at the soil, at the correct dilution, applied to the root zone, never stronger, never on the leaves. Here is the quiet truth that most home gardeners never realize, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The average American kitchen produces more nitrogen in a single week than a small vegetable garden actually needs in a month. The nutrients are not scarce. They are simply being routed to the landfill instead of the garden bed. A gardener who redirects even half of that waste stream toward the soil will, within a single season, stop needing to buy fertilizer altogether. Nitrogen solves the hunger problem, but most collapsing plants are not missing just one nutrient. They are missing 5 or 6 at once in different amounts, all at the same time. For that kind of rescue, a single ingredient is not enough. The garden needs a full recipe. Top 4. The Alchemist's Brew. A full-spectrum kitchen formula. If every struggling plant has a slightly different combination of deficiencies, what if there were one single mixture, built entirely from items most households throw away every morning before breakfast, that covered almost all of them at once? That mixture exists. It comes together like a recipe, with each ingredient doing a specific job. And understanding what each one actually does is the difference between a half-working tonic and a tonic that can save a plant overnight. Start with 3 familiar items pulled from the breakfast table. Banana peels provide potassium, the mineral that drives flowering, fruiting, and the plant's ability to move water through its cells. A tomato plant short on potassium produces small watery fruits with skins that split as they ripen. Eggshells, finely crushed, provide calcium carbonate, the building block of cell walls. Calcium deficiency is the cause behind one of the most frustrating sights in a tomato garden: the black, sunken patch at the bottom of an otherwise beautiful fruit, known as blossom end rot. And used coffee grounds, the kind left over in the filter basket after brewing, add a slow release of nitrogen and improve the physical texture of the soil. Now here is a point where much of the gardening advice on the internet is simply wrong, and it is worth pausing on because this myth has been passed around for decades. For as long as anyone can remember, gardeners have been told that coffee grounds make soil more acidic. That is a half-truth that has been stretched into a full myth. Fresh, unbrewed coffee grounds are indeed acidic, but used grounds, the kind that come out of a home coffee maker or a French press, are nearly neutral. Measurement from university soil labs place used grounds between 6.5 and 6.8 on the pH scale, almost exactly where most vegetable gardens want to sit. Used grounds will not dramatically acidify a garden bed. What they will do is add organic matter, feed earthworms, improve drainage, and release nitrogen slowly over several weeks. This is the kind of detail that separates a gardener who has read a lot of blogs from a gardener who actually understands what is happening in the soil. Coffee grounds are useful, just not for the reason most people think. 2 more ingredients take this recipe from good to exceptional. The first is Epsom salt, technically magnesium sulfate. Magnesium sits at the exact center of every chlorophyll molecule in every green leaf on Earth. No magnesium, no chlorophyll. No chlorophyll, no photosynthesis. When magnesium runs low, leaves begin to yellow between the veins, while the veins themselves stay green, a pattern known as interveinal chlorosis. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved into the brew delivers a direct magnesium boost that can reverse this pattern within days. A critical caveat belongs right here, because this is where well-meaning gardeners get into trouble. Yellowing leaves can have many causes. Nitrogen deficiency yellows the older leaves first. Iron deficiency yellows the youngest leaves. Overwatering and root rot can yellow the whole plant. Epsom salt is a cure for magnesium deficiency specifically. When the cause is magnesium shortage, the transformation is dramatic and fast. When the cause is something else, Epsom salt does very little, and adding it repeatedly, thinking the problem is just not resolving, can actually throw the soil's nutrient balance off. The lesson: diagnose before treating. The second specialty ingredient is blackstrap molasses, not regular table molasses, blackstrap, the dark, almost bitter version that comes from the final boiling of sugarcane. Blackstrap is rich in iron and trace minerals, but its real role in this formula is something different, and something almost no gardening website explains correctly. Molasses is food for microbes. A tablespoon of blackstrap stirred into the gallon jug of brew is like ringing a dinner bell for every beneficial bacterium in the liquid. Their populations multiply within hours. Those hyperactive microbes then break down the banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds far faster than the ingredients would decompose on their own. A brew without molasses takes 3 weeks to be useful. A brew with molasses can be ready in 3 days. All of these banana peels, crushed eggshells, used coffee grounds, Epsom salt, and blackstrap molasses go into about 1 gallon of warm water and steep for 3 to 5 days in a covered bucket. The result is a full-spectrum tonic carrying potassium, calcium, nitrogen, magnesium, iron, trace minerals, and a live culture of working bacteria, all in one pour. The common mistake here is simple, and it is the one most people make: skipping the molasses. Without that microbial catalyst, the peels and shells sit in the water and release their nutrients slowly, week after week. With the molasses in place, the release happens in days. That single tablespoon is the difference between a slow drip fertilizer and an instant rescue. This recipe covers the modern kitchen. But there is one more method, older than any of these ingredients, older than coffee and bananas in American grocery stores, older than most of the houses in any town where this video is playing, a method used by every civilization that ever grew its own food. Top 5. The giant tea bag aged manure extract. Before 1913, synthetic fertilizer did not exist. Every farm on Earth, from Iowa to Ireland to the foothills of India, ran on the same 2 inputs: animal manure and compost. Then a German chemist named Fritz Haber, along with an engineer named Karl Bosch, invented a process that pulls nitrogen out of thin air and turns it into ammonia. That invention, now called the Haber-Bosch process, is often credited with feeding half the human population alive today. It is also quietly the process that stripped the life out of cropland across most of the industrialized world over the following 100 years. That is the trade-off almost no one explains in a gardening book. Synthetic nitrogen fed billions of people. It also taught farmers to feed the plant while starving the soil. The results are now visible from space: dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, collapsed soil structure across the Great Plains, and a slow grinding loss of the microbial life that keeps a garden truly alive. For a home gardener, the old method still works. And for rescuing a dying plant in a backyard, it still outperforms the synthetic version. This method is called manure tea. Among old-time farmers in the Appalachian Hills and the Pennsylvania countryside, it has another name: the giant tea bag. The setup is as simple as any method on this list. A shovel full of aged, dried manure from chickens, cows, or rabbits, never fresh, goes into a porous sack. An old cotton pillowcase works. So does a burlap feed bag or a mesh laundry bag. The sack is tied shut at the top and dropped into a 5-gallon bucket of water. Over the next 3 to 5 days, the water slowly extracts the soluble nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and a long list of trace minerals, leaving the solid matter safely inside the sack, where it will not burn the garden and will not carry weed seeds into the beds. Each kind of manure brings a different profile, and choosing the right one matters more than most people realize. Aged chicken manure carries the highest levels of nitrogen and phosphorus of the 3, making it the most powerful growth stimulant. A single cup of chicken manure tea, properly diluted, can push a tired tomato plant back into heavy flowering within a week. Cow manure is more balanced, lower in nitrogen, but exceptional for building the long-term structure of the soil and for feeding the humus layer beneath the topsoil. Rabbit manure is the quiet secret of experienced gardeners. It is the only common manure that can be applied raw to a garden without burning roots, because the nitrogen is already in a mild form. Rabbit-based tea is the gentlest option and the safest for young seedlings. Here's the mistake that kills more manure tea gardens than any other single factor: using fresh manure. Fresh droppings from any animal carry too much ammonia. They also carry weed seeds and pathogens from whatever the animal was eating that week. A single bucket of fresh manure applied too generously can scorch an entire row of seedlings within 48 hours. The manure must be aged, ideally for 6 months to a year, before it ever goes into the tea bag. There are no shortcuts on this step. Once the tea is brewed, dilution becomes the next critical decision. The finished liquid gets diluted down to the color of weak iced tea, roughly 1 part tea to 10 parts clean water, before a single drop touches the garden. That dilution ratio is not a guess. It is the line between a tonic that heals and a tonic that burns. Applied at the right strength, a single cup poured at the root zone of a tomato plant can keep that plant thriving for a full week, sometimes longer. There is one more detail worth knowing, because old-time farmers swear by it and modern soil science now backs it up. Manure tea is most effective when applied in the cool hours, early morning, or the last hour before sunset. In the heat of midday, much of the nitrogen evaporates before the roots can absorb it. In the cool of evening, the soil holds on to the nutrients and the plant drinks at its own pace overnight. The final result is a fertilizer that combines every essential nutrient a plant needs with the living microbes that help the plant actually use those nutrients. It is the full ecosystem in a single bucket, and it costs nothing beyond what the animals have already provided for free. 5 fertilizers, 5 methods, every one of them already in the kitchen, the garden, or the shed. Each one solves a different problem. Each one costs nothing. Each one begins to work within a week, and in some cases inside of 2 days. What ties all 5 together is the principle beneath them. The things most often called waste in a modern kitchen are, in almost every case, the exact inputs a garden needs to come back to life. The gardener who understands this has access to a supply of fertilizer that will never run out, never raise its price, and never carry a warning label. The garden, in return, asks only that its keeper pay attention and remember how the old methods worked. The next time a tomato plant starts to yellow, or a pepper stops setting fruit, or a proud old zucchini begins to fade, pause before reaching for the shovel. The cure is very likely already sitting in the trash can. If any of these 5 rings true, leave a note below about which one will be tried first. Share this video with a fellow gardener who has been losing more plants than they have been saving, and keep the old knowledge alive, because every kitchen that turns its scraps back into the soil is one more small piece of something worth holding on to. Happy gardening. If these ancient remedies change the way you look at the scraps in your kitchen, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Let's plant the future together. The next treasure will be revealed soon.